You can't be better than Jesus. This is what this guy said to me. And I think it was somewhere around 1992 or 1993. I think it was 92. I think it was the summer or into the autumn of 1992. And I was going through an extremely stressful time in my life. Probably one of the most extremely stressful times in my life. Hey, Gail. And it was a body worker that I trusted, and I was in a lot of pain. And it was right before they realized that my back had been fractured. And, hey, Stuart. And I had gone and done something at my business, and then I did some speeches. That's what it was. I'd done some speeches, and I was in a lot of pain. So I went to see my body worker, and he was working on me, and they didn't know what was wrong with me. And it was after work, and he couldn't believe I was still maintaining a 100-mile week of running, and I was still trying to compete, and still trying to like qualify for things and whatnot with my running, while working full time, and doing these speeches, and getting ready for a criminal trial that I had to testify in. And we had just gotten, I think we had just gotten the indictment on the criminal. But the case, didn't go to trial until like 11 months later, or 10 and a half months later, something like that. And I didn't know, nobody knew what was wrong with my leg and my back. So I was laying on the table, and I was telling him, how I wanted to help people, and what my speech did, and the reaction of the people in the audience, and that 3 detectives came up and shook my hand, and really liked what I had to say, and hey, thank you, Stuart. Really liked what I had to say, and so he said to me, you're going through so much. I can't believe you're doing all this, and he's very successful in my industry. He's very, very successful. You gotta remember, this is like how many years ago? And at the same time, I was eyeing the industry that he was in, but he didn't know it. I did not tell him, because I didn't know how he felt about it, but I thought he was a friend. Well, it wasn't the first time I ever felt jealousy from him, and it definitely was not the last time. And then he said to me, you can't be better than Jesus. Don't try being better than Jesus. And I looked at him, and like, he was a born-again Christian. I'm just an everything. I don't know what I am. I'm so many different, I believe in so many different systems, because whatever works for the individual and is good, it's awesome. It's great. So I don't have any particular, I'm Judeo-Christian, but I'm also Eastern, but yet I'm also this, and I'm also that, and it doesn't really matter to me. As long as you're happy. That's how I look at it. And you're not hurting anybody. So he said this, and I said, what do you mean by that? He goes, well, you're doing too much. He's starting to complain. He's working on me. And I'm like, what do you mean? But I'm happy. He goes, well, that's amazing. How can you, I don't understand how you can do this while, you're suffering and this and that. And I said, well, I never thought about it as suffering. I said, I thought about it as something I was going through. And to do this speech and help other people and shed light for people who are detectives and they're trying to advance their careers, and basic lay people on psychology and how you think about turning things around. That's really what it was about. It was about, how do I survive through the things that I survive? How do I take a look at life and make lemonade, in a sense? I think there might be a book out there written by somebody called Making Lemonade. I don't know. And it's about that very thing. But taking the things that happen to you in life, turning them around, finding the best, and then sharing that goodness with complete strangers in an audience. And at the same time, this is what was happening in our office in defense contracting, where I worked in financial budgets and planning. We had a pay freeze for 2 years, and I took on what they wanted us to do, and I probably didn't have to do it, and I would have still been kept at the company. But I did it anyway, and I volunteered to be a facilitator, so we could save a lot of money. And then I volunteered for there was different areas I could volunteer for. So I had my regular job, and then I was a facilitator, and then I was a secretary, and then I did something else. I can't remember what it was. And I was involved in 2 of the 3 projects at the same time while I was going through everything else. And that's when he said, you can't be better than Jesus. And I went, where's that coming from? So somebody says something to you and you go, I got to put that in a parking lot and think about that later, or write that down and say, what did that all mean? Well, fast forward years later, that was 1992. Years later, that year I went into massage therapy school in 92, and I was still working in finance, but I couldn't sit down anymore because of my back and my leg. Even after spinal surgery, I had 7.5 hours of spinal surgery. So that was 1993, and the trial was successful, and we won, and the guy got put away for 30 years, and he served 15, yada yada. And years later, I find out that this guy, it's not that many years later, actually it was 5.5 years later, he's losing his business because the place where he has his office is inside of a health club. And so his father is friends with the guy that owns the club that I'm in now, that I'm renting space from. And at that point, I had been there going on, not quite 2 years, like a year and a half, something like that. And it was new owners. So of course, when you have new owners, you're trying to, always try to be on your best behavior, but you also try to just be calm and patient and just watch how things go. So the owner came up to me and said, listen, he names the guy, and he says, I'm going to build a suite up on the top above the racquetball court, and and the racquetball court that I'm going to build up on top is not going to be a racquetball court, so you won't hear the bouncing balls and this and stuff from the court and this and that. We're going to have, gym equipment down there and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay. I said, well, I love that guy. I said, him and I, he goes, I know you know each other. I didn't know how well you knew each other. I said, oh, I've known him since like 1987. Yeah, sure. I could work with him, no problem. And he said, you'd each have your own separate office. I'm like, oh. He said, and then you could share another room if you had another therapist, and then you guys could split it. I'm like, oh, it's great, man. I would love working with him. He has his clientele, I have mine, we're good. Well, my ex-friend now didn't see it that way. He thought he was the older, he was the guy, he felt more superior to me. And when I called him up with the good news of I was to make that decision whether he comes on board or not, and I said to the owner, oh, well, he said, we'll call him now because he's nervous. I'm like, all right. So I went down to my office and I called him and I said, hey, I got some really cool news. You and I are going to be, we're not only buddies. I said, we're going to be working like almost side by side. This is going to be like awesome, man. You've got your style, I got mine. We got our own clientele, and then we got an extra room, and we could bring another therapist in and split the fee and everything. It's going to be really, really cool. We'll have our own separate businesses, but we can split this. And he goes, oh, well, I don't think so. And I go, why? And he starts to basically threaten my business, that he is told that he's going to be in full charge, and I am nothing. I'm like this little pawn in this. And the anger starts to build in me, but I don't want to learn. I said, well, no, I think you're really wrong. That's not what the owner just told me. And he's a pretty straightforward kind of guy. And he actually was. The owner was a very straightforward kind of guy. Always very honest with me. And really actually had a lot of respect for me. And every once in a while I hear from him. Haven't heard from him in a year and a half. But that's about how long. It's like every 2 years I hear from him. And he's since moved down to Florida. And we're up in Jersey here. So I found out from other therapists that knew him how pissed off he was that he wasn't going to get this. And I found out what he really thought of me from the therapists. And I was like, oh man. And the anger was so inside of me, was just so immense. I'm like, wait, didn't he see all the struggles I went through? I mean, and I'm being kind. I opened our doors. I did this. And I went, you know what? He's just not digging it, man. He's not getting it. He's not that person he told me he was all those years ago, that he was like real, born-again Christian kind of thing. And I'm not one of them, but they're supposed to be, not trying to slay the other person that's equally employed, let's put it that way, or equally self-employed. They're not supposed to be like that. They're supposed to be more open-minded, have a better perspective, supposedly. Every religion's supposed to have this, right? Okay. Well, I kept praying, and I go, God, you got to stop me from being angry because I won't be able to work on bodies. This is not good. And it took me quite some time, and I went for a lot of runs. I went out for very long runs, and I would just be mulling over it just to get it out of my system. But it really upset my apple cart, and here it really disrupted even the physical therapy I was going through still with my leg after years. And what happened was, that was 1997. And one day, in 2005, I go to this meeting where all, or a high percentage of the New Jersey therapists all meet. It's a meeting of the minds. We're trying to get this special licensure in that really matters. And I don't know how many people were in this hotel at this big conference room meeting. And he's there. He's trying to get my attention, trying to get my attention, trying to get my attention. And I'm just like, I'm in my own world. I'm like, I'm going to let him come over here and talk to me. I'm not walking over there, because I finally got over this. It took me a while, and well, I found out that the other therapists who had known how he felt about me and how he really disrespected me in many, many, many ways, they were looking on. I didn't realize this, but I found out later. And finally, at one point, after 6 hours, he comes over and he's groveling and asking for my forgiveness. And I looked at him and I said, I'm not angry. I said, that passed a long time ago. I can't hold on to things like that. And I don't even know what you're talking about. Yes, I did. Because I really didn't care. I just avoided him like the plague. I thought, listen, he might be toxic to me at this point, even though years have passed. I don't know if he's quite over his own aggression. So I'm just going to sit here and be a quiet little puppy, you know. It's a big meeting anyway. There's hundreds of people. So he couldn't wait to talk to me and asked me for my, and he couldn't understand that I would forgive him. I just said, I don't care. It's okay. Let it go. Got done, and I went into the ladies' room. And 3 of the women followed me who were therapists, and they go, you just forgave him? I can't believe you just forgave him. I said, well, I forgave him a long time ago. I said, no, I didn't exactly forget about it, because you're not too stupid, and I'm not too stupid, you know. I'll look over my shoulder. But, you got to just move on. And you got to just accept the fact that somebody was desperate at that time, and maybe was in his character, but he wasn't going to be that way unless he was really losing his entire business, which he wasn't. He was just greedy. He was just greedy. And people are threatened by other people for pretty much no reason at all. Because if somebody came to me and said, I'm so-and-so's client, I'd be like, I don't know, let me call him. That's me. Unless I had a severe falling out. And I will ask them. So what you learn from this is, it's funny what people say to you. And if people feel threatened by you, like he couldn't cajole. He couldn't cajole with me when I was around him. And I think everything's funny. And I joke around a lot. Especially around other therapists. And I'm pretty corny. And he knew me as that, and he couldn't kid around. He could not kid around. And I should have picked up on it. But I didn't. I was a kid. I look at it this way. I was, in my 30s, early 30s, late 20s, and I didn't pick up on it. So, I was never trying to be better than Jesus, as he would say. Okay? But I was trying to do the right thing all the time. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And when somebody accuses you of trying to rectify things and try to make things right all the time, trying to be good all the time, you're not trying to be like Allah or Jesus or Buddha or whatever. You may admire these people and other people and other prophets and other holy men and religious figures and whatnot. But it doesn't mean that you think you are them. That's what he was trying to accuse me of. Pretty terrible. But you have to watch what comes out of people's mouths and their whole demeanor in order to really understand where they're going with what they're saying to you. And then you can pick up on nuances and protect yourself, insulate yourself from other people's toxicity and jealousies. So, food for thought. You never know. Have a great night. Stay safe and be well.